Oh, okay, great. Um, and I'll speak to that in a minute. Um, if there are no changes, we can adopt the agenda. Um, you received the minutes of June 9th, 2021. I haven't received any edits, nor have Christine. So without objection, we'll deem those adopted. I do want to thank Christine for moving us to the Zoom platform to permit us to record this meeting. And I think it's a very fitting tribute to Ruth, actually, because she was the one who first raised the idea of recording our meetings and pushed us. We had, I think, discussion over the course of at least 2 meetings. And here we are, unfortunately, in the wake of her passing. We do have the recording of this meeting, and I thank Christine for making that possible. All right. Also, I wanted to mention that the filling of Laura's vacancy is moving forward. And I understand from Christine that the county executive's office is moving forward to hold interviews of the applicants who have applied for Laura's vacancy. Is there anything more, Christine, you might have to share on that?
There isn't. I did check in with the executive staff, and as you said, they are moving forward with interviews. So they'll select someone and send the name to the council. I don't have any additional details.
Okay, well, that's good to know, though. Hopefully, in short order, we'll have a replacement for Laura. The name that the county executive comes up with does have to go to the county council for what I hope will be pro forma approval. And unfortunately,
George,
yes,
yes,
Ed?
yeah, this is Ed. I just was going to mention Dale just sent me a message asking me to join him with the interview. So they are going
Good.
forward, setting it up.
Great. Thank you for that update. Unfortunately, we'll now have to move forward to advertise Ruth's vacancy. That is a county council appointee, in contrast to the county executive appointee for Laura's position. So the county council will have to advertise that and move forward to fill that one. Okay, moving into the agenda itself. The next 2 items are actually to be considered in tandem. Going back to, I think, our May meeting, we discussed having a combination of virtual and in-person listening sessions to consider input from the community as to the items that we have considered for recommending to the county council for putting on the ballot. You see here the dates that Christine has put forward for the 3 virtual listening sessions, which is what we had come up with, 3 virtual listening sessions. And the consensus of the commissioners were to have those spread among an evening and 2 weekend days, a Saturday and Sunday. And I recognize that everyone may not be available for each of these dates. That's going to be impossible to make that certain. But for each of those dates, that's okay, because the testimony and the videos will be accessible to all. We also had talked about back in May that we would have 2 in-person sessions. At that time, we were speaking about one of them being in the Up County Government Center, because as you all recall, last go round, we had to cancel that 5th one scheduled for there because of COVID. And we also talked about the second of the in-person virtual sessions being held perhaps at the county council office building. However, since May, as Christine and Ron and I were discussing this, we were cognizant of the fact that there's now been an uptick in COVID-19, and of course, the requirement for masking again, coupled with the fact that the council office building is not even open yet, as we had hoped that it would be by now. So that's reflected on the statements on your agenda. So we wanted to throw out for your consideration whether we should change those 2 in-person sessions to virtual listening sessions, or plow on to have those in person, perhaps at the back of the queue. I throw that out for your thoughts, and maybe Christine, would you like to add on to the thinking before commissioners weigh in?
No, thank you, George. I just, I mean, you said it all, and the only thing I would add is that as I started researching where we could have it, a number of facilities that we might use are still closed. Not to say that we couldn't find open ones, but for example, the Uptown, community center in Germantown is still closed to the public, and I know that's one place that that the commissioners discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thoughts among the commissioners?
Hey, George, can you hear me?
Sure, Chris.
Hey, I apologize. I got on a few minutes late, but I'm present now.
You are. Go ahead, Chris.
I don't have anything to add. I understand the situation. I just want to let everybody know that I'm on, and I think it makes sense to schedule the Zoom meetings or virtual meetings in lieu of the in-person meetings, given the circumstances. We could always wait and see if it changes later. I know that our listening sessions are spaced out over the next couple months, so a lot can change. But I don't have anything else to add to that. Thank you.
So George, it's David. I was going to suggest a wait and see approach on the moving the in-person to virtual. Hope springs eternal. So hopefully, things do change, and conditions would permit moving them keeping them in person, but we can always schedule them after, I guess early January. I mean, the first 3 are October, November, December. I assume we were looking at, we didn't talk about a schedule, but if we're talking about looking into the new year, kind of leaving those on the schedule and waiting and seeing, and maybe by our November or December meeting, making a call as to whether they stay in person or they move virtually.
George, this is Larry. I absolutely agree with what David said.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Others?
This is Cappy. I agree. I
Please.
think that makes sense.
Hey, George, I think I'm gonna make it unanimous. I agree.
Terry, I see a thumbs up from Ron. All right, I'm amenable to that. There's just 2 caveats. One is clearly we can do that. We can make a note on the initial press release that our intent is to have additional sessions either in person if the COVID circumstances permit, or additional virtual. As far as the timing, which of course we can discuss at either October, November, or December meetings, is we have to be careful as to how far off we push them, because we need to give ourselves time to deliberate on the input and our final decisions, or recommendations, I should say, on the issues, so that we can draft the final report, deliberate on it, and get it to the council by the May 1st deadline. That's the only thing. We don't want to tie ourselves up by pushing it too late. But absolutely, I agree with you. We can hold that in abeyance, and in the October, November, December timeframe, schedule it. We also keep in mind that any sessions we schedule in inclement weather could come into play. That it won't necessarily happen if we have them virtually, perhaps, but if we do in persons, we might have a problem. Kathy, I saw your hand up.
So could we maybe set the meeting dates and then just decide, let's say we set the meeting dates tentatively as in person, and then should circumstances not allow, we then keep the same dates, but have them virtual instead.
Well, that's a thought. And mark them down as tentative.
Tentatively in
and date that
person, and then
could be moved
if
to virtual.
circumstances don't allow, just make it virtual, but at least the dates will be set. We'll have a clear picture of when we're going to be holding things, and so will the public.
Well, we could, if we did that, we could say that they would be changed to virtual. Would we, you think, Christine, if we did that, we could lock down dates at the two preferred locations?
I mean, we can do our best, and I'll just I can report back to you if we have any, trouble getting a location on a specific date, but it seems like a good approach.
I mean, obviously, if we did that, we would do that in the back end. So later time, allowing for the possibility that things would open up, of course. Does that sound reasonable to commissioners, Kathy's approach?
Yes.
I hear a yes from Nicole, a thumbs up from Ron, I think a thumbs up from Larry. Is that your thumb,
Yeah.
Larry? A yes from Chris? All right, thank you, Kathy,
George.
for suggesting that. Perry?
Yeah, I just want to know, so we'd be clear, what would the circumstances be that would trigger us to go back in person? Would it be the bill?
I assume it would be the county deciding, which is the council and the executive, that the county is opening up given the COVID rate
Right.
decline, hopefully, and the government buildings opening up themselves.
Right, okay. Yeah, so as long as we're all clear, what the gauge is, that's all.
Allow Christine and Ron and me to word it in that fashion. But you're right, Perry, we have to be clear about that. All right, well then we'll find dates at the back end to do what Kathy has suggested, and to allow us to move forward then with a press release. That segues then to the next part of the agenda, which is to look at the draft press release that Christine and Ron and I had put together. We welcome your thoughts and comments. However, we're not editing it today as a committee of the whole or even voting on it, but we do want your input and your thoughts. We're not drafting this by committee per se, but we wanted you to be eyeball a document to lay out what we would put forward for the public to give thought to before any listening session. And if there's ways to improve upon it, we're open to that. So we can then take it back and rework it in any way. So if you have thoughts, again, we're not voting on the document, but we do want your input. So any thoughts, let us have it. And then after today, we'll take it back and make the changes, any changes. So your thoughts?
George,
Yeah, Kathy.
on bullet number 3, I think we probably need to consider the wording on that a little bit, because
Okay.
it says the last sentence says the commission has tentatively proposed, subject to revision, that such an instance only the amendment that receives the highest number of favorable votes would take effect and amend the charter. So I was just thinking about the numbers of that. So if you have 2 competing amendments, A and B, and let's say one gets slightly more numbers, but it's still a low number, do you really think that should take effect? You see, it's not,
That's what I thought we voted on. No? How would you suggest it?
I'm not sure. I'd have to think about it some more, but I think we need to give some thought to the wording on this one.
Well, last time, obviously, as mentioned earlier, there had been those two on the makeup of the council, obviously diametrically opposed. Had they both been approved, in that case, obviously, there's only two, so it would be the higher. Wouldn't it have been whichever one got the most votes, the higher of the two?
But what if,
Irrespective of one got very little votes?
but what if even the highest votes were very low compared to the overall number of votes?
I
Then
understand
that
that, which
would
is
be-
unfortunate. That reflects turnout. That could happen in voting for an individual. You could have very few votes, but whoever gets the higher number of votes prevails.
I'd like to take a look at this, spend a little more time thinking about this and going back to what we originally said. I think, Larry, that was your proposal. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we talked about it because it was an issue, and the court said that all the writings in the papers said the court would have a hard time determining anything about this because it had no guidance. And so this would provide guidance should that happen. That and you know, then the one that had, if you win by one vote, you win by one vote. That's all there is, you know, all there is to it. So if 10 people vote, well, I mean, that's just a turnout thing, as George said. I mean, but I don't know that low or high numbers of voters matters. Whichever one has a majority. Of course, if people could vote both of them down too, somebody could vote. I mean, we could have a proposal on there that does not get approved because the negative votes were higher than the positive votes.
We, as you mentioned, there was an opinion of the Attorney General decades ago involving Baltimore City where this issue arose, and they were advised that if both passed, that neither takes effect because they couldn't discern the intent of the voters. We patterned our recommendation and language after what's in effect in the Anne Arundel County Charter, which says basically what has been written here. The actual language we drafted is what's in the Anne Arundel County Charter, namely that if both were to pass, the one that passed with the highest votes goes into effect. I don't know how to address your concern, Kathy, where there's a low voter turnout. That's unfortunately democracy.
Yeah.
Kathy, can I just, yeah, I have my hand up. Kathy, I'm not sure. Can I just poke at your concern a little bit? Because you're talking about a majority. So there needs to be majority in order for it to pass. So a majority of the voters in order for it to pass. We're not talking about turnout of 1 million and 5 voters vote for it and 4 voters vote against it, and the one that had 5 passes. We're talking about a situation where the majority of the people voting passed 2 different amendments. So I'm not sure I see what your concern is under the reality of what we're talking about here.
And I think when you said, George, I think what you said made sense, that if both pass, the one with the highest number. I think maybe that was what I was looking for in that language. Maybe it would make it a little more clear. It just struck me, you know, I agree with the original recommendation. And I think that makes this a little more clear if we add it to that.
So maybe add some language approved by the majority of the voters?
That if both receive a favorable, let's see, a majority of favorable votes, the one with the most favorable votes wins.
Oh, Kathy, I think, I mean, if this is what it says when two questions are on the ballot and are both approved by the voters, but are irreconcilable.
Yeah, okay, maybe
Drop
that.
down to the bottom, then you drop down to the bottom of that paragraph. It says, in such instances, only the amendment that receives the highest number of favorables would take effect. I mean, I think that, I mean, I thought it was pretty well stated.
Okay, all right.
I'll change. Go
I'll
ahead,
be
Kathy.
fine.
Sorry.
That's fine.
I,
Thanks, everybody else.
in hindsight, looking at this, highest should be changed to higher. And depending on what we hear from the public, we'll be taking another look at this, Kathy.
Sure.
And it perhaps the actual language, this doesn't show the actual language we had voted on. We can refine it again if you think it's, if the majority thinks is necessary. Kathy, so we'll get another crack at this again, okay? But we'll change highest to higher as I look at this, okay? But thank you for your thoughts, Kathy, as well as the others. I appreciate it. Other thoughts on the press release?
George, Larry.
Yep, Larry.
I would just ask Christine to look at the first paragraph where it talks about the Montgomery County Charter Review Commission will hold 5 listening sessions, yada, 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 and phrase it according to what we had, our discussion was now. Like I would say, we would like to hold up to 5 or 6 or whatever we want to say. And then some of which will be virtual, some of which would be in person, if allowed by the county regulations, or, you know, just a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right.
On that top paragraph.
Yeah, we'll have to play with that paragraph and later on also, where we had listed 2 in-person listening sessions. We'll have to play with that also. So you're right, Larry. We'll play with both of those to make the changes per our earlier discussion. Thank you. You're right. Also, October and December, we'll have to play with that time frame. We'll make those adjustments. Thank you. Other thoughts?
I have a question about the language for signing up.
Yeah, Nicole.
It says, if you'd like to participate in one of the 3 remote virtual, you must sign up in advance by calling and providing your telephone number. The sign up in advance mean 1 minute before it starts, or 2 hours before it starts, or a day before it starts, or?
Good question. This language just simply tracked a previous press release. I think our press release from last year. Personally, I don't care if it was 2 minutes before, but it's a matter of logistically having the information before. We took anybody who showed up that day and wanted to speak. Any thoughts on that, Christine, as far as the logistics?
I could look at the language that we use for the council hearing signups and do something similar, although I think we do have a cutoff for when you sign up for council meetings, but maybe we could do something similar to what they do, but then kind of tack on that, you know, you still can show up and testify. You would be, you know, at the end of the line of members of the public who are testifying if you don't sign up in advance, but then you could still obviously, you know, join the virtual meeting and be put in the queue. It'll just, you know, require the moderator, you know, to kind of keep track of that.
For the in-person sessions, as we've had in the past, obviously, we took anybody who showed up at any point. And I think this spoke mostly, Nicole, to the virtual sessions, having to sign up in advance so that, and I don't know how the process works, and I'm a little nervous myself sharing these things as to how this even works, and getting the people on the phone. But I think this was necessary. Like this paragraph was taken from the county council's releases for signing up for their hearings. And I assume there was a necessity for having this done in advance to get them into the queue. And therefore needed to have some cutoff in order to get them in the queue. But I know Christine's going to look into this now, whether or not there's a way to a last minute caller while the session is going on to get them on afterwards. Again, I have no problem with a last minute person, but I don't know if that's feasible or not. So that's why this language is as it is. But Christine, I appreciate you looking further into this. But this paragraph is to address the virtual, and that's what it starts out saying. If you'd like to participate in one of the 3 remote virtual, actually, there should be another word or 2 there. So yeah, we'll look into it further. But again, for at least the people who go to the in-person sessions, we've let anybody who shows up speak.
Thank you.
We'll see. Thank you, Nicole, for raising it. Just a minute. Okay, let me just make a note of that. Virtual. Other comments, questions?
George, I just have a comment about the whole thing. It seemed a little wordy to me, the announcement. I think I would just try to cut down. I mean, when you read some of the language, it's kind of circular. And I just felt that, well, geez, if I was somebody just coming to this new, I wouldn't know what they meant. In lieu of the threshold of 6 of 9 members of the council, what are they, we're very familiar with it because we lived through changing it. But, I just would look to try to cut down as much verbiage as possible without taking away from the essence of the proposed amendments. I would just suggest that.
I accept that, and I appreciate your comments, Larry. Interestingly enough, what was difficult in this one is when I took a crack at the first draft, is I recognize how different this was when the one last time, because last time we only had the issue of the makeup of the council. And it was sort of easy to hit at that. It was just one issue. It was the makeup of the council. We set out what the current makeup was and what the proposed change was. We weren't laying out the other proposal, just our proposal, and what the current makeup was. One issue. Here we had 3 different issues, and we had to set them out. So yes, it got to be a little wordy, and I respect what you're saying. So we'll take a fresh look, but it may be difficult to cut it down much. And then we were going into 2 types of listening sessions, virtual and in person, and laying out the dates. But I respect what you're saying. We'll take a fresh look at it. It just may be tough to cut it down much, but we'll see. Maybe we can, and see if we can avoid being circular. Thank you.
And George,
Yeah.
another thing you might consider is having the press release itself focus on the sections of the charter that we're considering amending, and then putting the proposals in a separate attachment to the press release. Again, I suggest that, recognizing that that might not give some people all of the information if they just look at the press release, and that only the people that are really interested in the issue are going to go to the attachment and review it. But if you that's going to be the case anyway, frankly. I think we're going to get those who are interested in these issues and or mobilized around these issues to testify anyway. So again, I think one way of simplifying it might be to put the kind of more of the substance of the amendment into a separate attachment, and just in the press release, cite the sections of the charter that we're looking to amend.
That's a thought. That's a thought. Okay, thank you, David. Give some consideration to that. Kathy?
I like it the way it is because it kind of says right out front. I think people, if you have to go to another document, will lose a lot of people, and we're trying to get as much interest as we can and make it as easy for the reader as we can. So I like the way that it states what it is that you're proposing without having to look somewhere else.
Thank you, Kathy, for your thinking on that too. Other thoughts in the press release? I know no one's shy. I appreciate all the thoughts. And of course, as we say in the press release, as we did last time, we'll also welcome written comments. And we got them last time, and I'm sure we'll get them again. Okay, well, this was helpful, really helpful. I really appreciate that. We're moving along really quickly. Before we adjourn, I wanted to bring to the attention of the commissioners, and particularly Chris, you're there on the phone still? Because you raised the issue to the commission of recall, only to be advised correctly by Ed that the state constitution precluded such for state and county officials. But I want to let you know, and the commissioners, particularly Chris, that Delegate Novotny, who's from Howard County, a freshman delegate, who also represents a portion of Carroll County, that he has made it known that he's planning to introduce a wide-ranging bill in the next session of the General Assembly to address the issue of recall for state and local officials. Obviously, that's going to have to be a constitutional amendment, as Ed has said, which is going to require a 3/5 vote of each chamber of the General Assembly and then go to the voters. But I want to let you know that Delegate Novotny, a Republican delegate from Howard County, is planning to introduce a bill for a constitutional amendment on recall. And so you may want to contact Delegate Novotny if you're so inclined, since I know you're interested in pursuing recall of local officials, county officials. So I just wanted to share that with you. Anyway, our next meeting is.
Thank you, George, for that follow-up. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, Nicole. So our next meeting is October 13th, 2021, and we'll prepare ourselves for the listening sessions coming up. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Yeah, okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's passed. And I hope you have an enjoyable day. It looks like it's going to be a nice one again. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Have a good day.
Take care all.
Okay.
All right.